let's get started. We're going to start with introductions from each of our panelists. We're going to start with Billy.
Hey guys, my name's Billy. I'm currently an assistant professor at Mount St. Mary's University. It's a small liberal arts school in Emmitsburg, Maryland. There I teach biology and chemistry courses. It's a small school, so we just have a science department. We kind of teach a little bit of everything. Before that, I was doing my PhD at Johns Hopkins, the School of Medicine. It was in biochemistry, but I worked in a molecular neuroscience lab. And then before that, I was doing my undergrad at the University of Virginia, also in biochemistry. Excuse me. As for SfN DCMA, I'm honored to be the president for this year. Before that, I served in some other roles such as secretary. But yeah, that's a little about me.
Thanks, Billy. Jaya?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jaya Vishwanathan, and I have the honor of serving as your vice president of the SfN DCMA chapter this year. And before that, I was the social media co-chair. So I'm currently at the National Institute on Aging as a program analyst, working to support the research goals for the National Plan to Address Alzheimer's. Before that, I did a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Maryland in electrophysiology, neurophysiology, looking at auditory and perceptual mechanisms. Before that, I did a PhD and a master's in cognitive neuroscience and neuroscience, respectively, and I'm originally an engineer.
Thanks, Jaya. Yash?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Yash Kamula. So my current position is a PhD student at the University of Maryland College Park. So I'm entering my 5th year at this point in the neuroscience and cognitive science program. Before that, I did my bachelor's degree in neuroscience and behavioral biology, NBB, at Emory University. And my research across my career has focused on effects of exercise on brain health in older adults. And my involvement with SfN is that I'm the current secretary.
Thanks, Yash. Sydney?
Hi there. So my name is Sydney Woods. I'm currently a PhD candidate at George Washington University. Right now, I'm getting my PhD in neuroscience in a stress lab. We're looking at developmental stress and the effects on the brain. Before that, I got my bachelor's in human biology and a minor in political science as well from North Carolina State University. And then I also have a master's in biomedical sciences from East Carolina University. As for SfN DC, I'm the neuropolicy chair alongside Hannah. I've been a member for about 2 years and started by attending meetings like this one before eventually running for a position. So, yeah.
Thanks, Sydney. We're going to jump to Hannah now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I am currently a grad student at George Mason in the Cognitive and Behavioral Neuroscience program. Previously, I got my dual bachelor's in neuroscience and psychology from George Washington University. I have previous training in the clinical side and in different neuroscience labs. I'm focusing my current thesis on molecular basis of learning and memory. And my involvement with the DCMA chapter has been serving as neuropolicy co-chair along with Sydney for this past year.
Thanks, Hannah. Laura?
Sorry, Laura, I don't think we can hear your mic.
Yeah. No.
All right, one more time. You hear me
Yes.
now? Okay.
Perfect.
Sorry about that. I'm Laura Drevashenko. As of January, I am a development scientist at Mesoscale Development or Discovery, sorry, which is a biotech company in Rockville. A little bit about my background. I graduated in 2014 from Ursinus College with a bachelor's in neuroscience and psychology. I then worked as a chemist at a contract research organization, which is more on the industry side of things. And that was at Eurofins Lancaster Labs. I then returned to Ursinus to work as a lab tech before starting grad school in 2017. So I got my PhD in neuroscience from Uniform Services University, and now I'm in my current position. I've been on the DCMA board for 3 years now as an outreach chair.
Thanks, Laura. And then I am your last introduction. Hi, my name is Summer. I am finishing up my 4th year in my PhD program in neuroscience PhD at Uniform Services University. Before that, I have a bachelor's of biological sciences with a dual major in neuroscience and biochemistry from University of Minnesota. And then I did a 1-year postdoc fellowship at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. But I am currently the social media co-chair and have been on the board for about 1.5 years. But now we're going to jump on and do a little bit more introduction on further experience with the chapter. So Laura, if you want to get us started, we're going to kind of go through how you've what you've gotten out of being on the board and being part of this chapter.
Yes, so a lot of what I've done the past couple of years, especially joining during the pandemic, was a lot of in-person networking events, which weren't happening at the time. However, as an outreach chair, we have wanted to get more into outreach events with kids. So some of those are finally going back in person. So I'm excited to do more of those in the future than we currently have been able to do. But one event we recently did was a brain awareness event at the Medical Museum in Silver Spring. So we were able to interact with kids and adults of all ages and just talk to them about neuroscience.
Awesome. Hannah, do you want to jump in with anything?
Sure. So for the past year, Cindy and I have gone to put together a few neuropolicy events virtually. Those have been interesting, having panel discussions and learning about different career paths. And I've helped out with some other events as well, including ones in person. And what I've gone out of it is getting to meet a lot of cool people and learning a lot.
Awesome. Let's keep the ball rolling. Sydney, what have you gotten out of being part of DCMA?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Hannah kind of touched on pretty much everything, but, you know, for the neuropolicy positions, we're really working to kind of organize these science policy related events for the chapter and educate members on, you know, what neuropolicy is and what are the current issues. You know, it's definitely something that I didn't even, you know, really think of as like a possibility as a neuroscientist, right? And I've learned how to organize events. You know, like Hannah mentioned, one of them was a career event, but we've also hosted like a training for advocating on the Hill, which is a super fun and unique DC experience. So yeah, really taking away, reaching outside my comfort zone, sending those cold emails, and yeah, networking with some really great people.
Awesome. Next, we're going to jump to Yash. Yash, how's your experience with DCMA been?
Yeah, my experience has been great. I've had a lot of responsibilities, kind of a wide range of things. Some of them being managing the members of who's in the chapter, removing members that aren't active, things like that. Also, I've gotten to help organize events with the other board members, host events like this one. And I've gained a lot from this. I would say just hearing about everyone's experiences, what they've done with their education, their experiences, and looking at how an organization like this works, and also networking.
Nice. Next up is Jaya.
Yeah, so for me, I think the biggest thing is I moved here to DC in 2017, and I didn't really know anyone except the lab I was moving to do my postdoc. So the biggest thing that I've gained as an immigrant from a different country is that I got a community. Like I have met a whole host of people doing very interesting research that I could chat about science and nerd out with. That, you know, not just people in my lab, and form a whole different community. That's what I've gotten out of it, and it's really valuable to me. So as I mentioned earlier, I've served as the social media chair, and now I'm currently the vice president. And so done different things like put together newsletters, hearing about all the achievements that our chapter members do, which is really always impressive. So kind of exercising that creative muscle a little bit has been really great as well. And putting together like proposals with the SfN to kind of do innovative things and events with the chapter has also been a learning experience. Thanks.
Thanks, Jaya. All right, we're gonna finish out with Billy.
Yeah, so I've been a part of the chapter since 2019, so about 4 or 5 years. I started off as the secretary. I met the chapter through an in-person science meeting we had at the University of Maryland and presented a poster, connected with the board members at that time, and really enjoyed that group of people in that event. So I onboarded as the secretary, as Yash described, a lot of those logistics behind the scenes to help the chapter run. And then this past year, had the opportunity to be the president to help kind of pull these pieces together. I've gotten to just watch all these amazing people work on things that I know nothing about, like science policy and running social media accounts. So it's been such a blast. But yeah, as everyone said, getting to meet really fun, cool people from all over DC and the surrounding area, all walks of life, all different research interests, career interests, personality types. So it's been a wonderful new community outside of like the bubble I was in grad school of the same people every day in the lab.
Thank you guys all for sharing. Now I want to kind of go into maybe general tips for your career field. Kind of general professional development and how you kind of set yourself up for finding your career. So this time we're going to start with Billy.
Yeah, so I would say just to take advantage of the resources you have around you, wherever you are, whatever career stage you're in. So I guess from the grad school perspective, most all grad schools have offices of professional development set up, career offices of people who are experts in helping you get into the career fields that you want, no matter what they are. So I really benefited from reading the emails that come in our inbox that I don't just delete right away, seeing what events are happening, what opportunities are available. So my advice would be, yeah, to take advantage of the people who are paid to help you find careers and get those jobs in fields you maybe didn't even know existed.
Solid advice. All right. Up next we have Jaya.
So my big advice would be to not say no to things that might help you learn and grow in areas that might not seem related to science, but that you might be passionate about. So for example, like one thing, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but like art was a big example for me. I got into it out of personal interest, but it has now served me also in my career and helped me expand the ways in which I communicate my science. And it has actually enhanced my CV quite a bit. And so if you're interested and passionate about trying something new, go for it, because you never know how it'll come back to serve you later in life.
Nice. I like that advice. Yash, what do you got for general tips?
I would say really just talk to everyone that crosses paths with you, because you don't know who's going to be like the gateway to your career or the gateway to you like finding interest in something. So really don't be like quiet about it. Just throw out questions, ask people what they're doing if you can get involved. That's really how I've made it here, I think.
And speaking of questions, Sydney, what is your general tips?
I'd say I kind of agree with everything that's kind of been said so far, and I can speak a little bit to getting into, I guess, being a graduate student. I actually started as a pre-med student and ended up in a research-based master's program, trying to boost that application. But I really enjoyed my lab work. And, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to maybe do in the end, but I kind of, like Jaya mentioned, I followed that passion, and I knew that having a PhD would open, more doors for me to make that decision on a career later down the road. So I guess my advice would be not being afraid of, changing your mind. If something, you think maybe you wanted to do one thing and then something else you end up loving more. Yeah.
Nice. Hannah, any tips for general professional development?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that's been said, especially along the lines of just getting sort of as much experience in like diverse backgrounds and areas, like subspecialty areas, especially. Like for me, it was helpful to get experience in several different types of labs, like on the clinical side and then on the bench side and stuff like that. And then also really focusing on the skill development and those transferable skills, because that can help like no matter where you end up, and it can also sometimes guide and navigate where you most are interested in.
Another good tip. Lastly, we're going to round out our panel with Laura. What do you got for us, Laura? No, we cannot hear you.
All right, we good now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about this. I always have the mic issues. But yeah, well, actually, I could repeat what everybody else said, but Yash in particular, when it comes to industry, it can be really challenging to break in. Once you break in, it's going to be a lot easier for you. But so I would agree with a lot of what he said with, taking those opportunities, getting to know your peers, your coworkers, any other scientists in the community that you can, because you never know later down the road if that could be a person who might be able to help you get a job. And then on the other end of that, make sure you are making a good impression on those people, because they could be the difference between getting into that career and not.
Good advice. We're actually going to stay with Laura, but now if each of you guys can kind of expand a little bit and maybe more specific tips of like, once you're in the career, how do you succeed there? So Laura, if you want to get started.
So once you're in the field, a lot of what I do, well, actually, I should back up and say that there's a lot more in industry besides just research and development. That is what I'm specifically in, but there's project management, there's medical science liaison, there's QA, there's all different fields. And so I can speak more to the R&D part of that, but it's really going to depend on where you go. So for me, even though I'm not specifically a project manager, I am a project lead. And so being able to manage people, the project, continue with my research background of reading primary literature and all of that, that's all been very helpful. So kind of just taking any opportunity to lead, I would say that's helpful, specifically for the R&D part of industry.
All right, now we're going to jump to Hannah. Tips for once you're in the career to succeed.
Yeah, so one of the things I was thinking of networking and how important that is, and how sometimes I think especially in grad school, like when you're focusing on one specific project, you can get sort of narrow in that. And of course, that's important to maintain focus, but also I think for research in general, especially in neuroscience, it is important to keep like connections and then keep like an open mind of different things that can be connected. And sort of the more people you meet doing different types of research, there can always be maybe new opportunities that weren't previously considered in the future. And so that can be through different events such as conferences and different different sciences that can still connect back to neuroscience and can open opportunities in the future.
Thank you. Sydney.
Yeah, just kind of expanding on that even more, specifically for science policy, you know, we're in DC, and DC is a great place to be involved in policy. Most of the, you know, big scientific groups like SfN, for example, host, you know, they'll have annual Hill Days that you can be a part of, where you go advocate for science and research funding on the Hill, which is a great networking opportunity to meet people, you know, in science and also staffers on the Hill. There's other, you know, nonprofits have offices here and host events here. Research America is one org, for example, that I've been pretty involved with, and they have a lot of networking events in DC. Really just taking opportunities that, you know, are available to you in DC, signing up for those listservs to get emails about opportunities. I swear that's how I have done most of the events that I've done, is just because I got an email. But yeah, just I don't always say no to opportunities as they come along. So
Awesome. We're gonna jump to Yash.
Yeah, specific tips for the career field. I would say soak up as much knowledge with techniques as you can from different people, with methods, or whether it's like a specific software that you're using, because once you do learn it, you can come back to it and use it productively. So that's, especially in research, I think that's important. Once you do have the foundation after your first project with the tool or whatever, you can come back to it, extend on it, do a new project, things like that, I think is important. Yeah.
We're gonna jump over to Jaya. Jaya, once you're in the career, how do you succeed? And maybe I'm gonna add in maybe tips to get into the career as well.
Okay. Okay, I think this answer will address both of those a little bit, but I think so. Piggybacking a little bit on what Laura said as well, I think in non-academic careers, a lot of the time, once you get in, there's a lot of on-the-job training, because whether you're working in a company, whether you're working in government, there's a lot of proprietary software and things like that that you have to learn, which you don't learn outside of it anyway. And so I would actually, I think, and we hire people with a lot of different skill sets. So at NIA, for example, there's people working on policy, there's people working on program, there's people who do review and are a little bit more on the science side. So I think what's really key is often developing some of the soft skills that people have been talking about, like networking, getting that like 30-second pitch of what your science is and why you're excited about it down. What a lot of prospective employers, I think, want to see is a passion for the field that they're in from you. And so typically I would actually advise that you can tailor it a little bit ahead of time, knowing what conference you're going to, right? Like, so if you're going to a conference, trying to network, trying to find a job, you can tailor it a little bit to the content of that conference, how your research ties into that and why you want to get into their field, for example. And so tweak it a little bit, have those kind of soft skills down, and then you will become, if you show like an aptitude for learning and enthusiasm for the science, people are going to be enthusiastic about hiring you and giving you a chance, and then you'll get on the job training for it. And so that would be my tips, to kind of work on the back end a little bit and then hone and then tailor it. Thanks.
Thanks, Jaya. Lastly, we're gonna jump to Billy. Same question, Billy. Both once you're in, how do you succeed, as well as getting in?
Sweet. First, I wanted to second what Yash said about how important it is to soak up techniques and skills. I remember when I was looking for jobs, whether they would be in academia or not, I read a job description. I'm like, well, I definitely don't know that skill, even though there are people in my lab who were doing it. I could have just spent a few weeks just following around and learning that skill. So definitely soak up all that's around you. As for me, so I'm currently in academia and I mainly teaching with some research as well. So I guess my tips for getting in are, they resonate, I think, both for graduate students and for faculty once you get there. And that is to kind of like broaden the experiences you have in terms of like getting things that you can show an employer as having done. So for example, things that you need to do to teach are like examples of teaching. So make sure you have teaching experience on your resume, whether it was mentoring someone in the lab or teaching a lesson in a course, like have those skills ready to be displayed. If you're in grad school and you're ever applying for grants, they're going to ask for things you've done, like workshops you've attended and seminars you've gone to. So like go to those, attend those. Same thing when you're in a faculty position. They're going to ask on grant applications what you did for professional development to show that you're still trying to go. So engage in those. Yeah, so a lot of those skills are the same. Yeah, get those experiences. Like I have a running document of every seminar or conference I attend so that when I'm applying for a grant, I can just keyword search that for showing evidence that I've invested in teaching competencies or grant writing skills or mentoring experience. So that'd be my advice. Once you're there, I guess, again, this probably applies to both stages, is to keep good records of the things you do so that you can pull up this information later. I remember when I was both writing grants and writing my thesis, there were times like, wow, I definitely was there. I remember what the speaker said, but I do not have any record of when this was or what the title was, who hosted it. And so I basically couldn't write it on a CV if I couldn't say what it was. So yeah, keep really good records. I say things like, if you think you're going to remember it, you're lying, just write it down. You'll need it later. Like there's been times I've wanted to get in contact with people about something. I just never wrote down their names. So I don't even know where to begin to look them up to communicate with them again. So yeah, keep good records, write down everything because you're going to need it later. But that's probably true of a lot of careers.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you to everyone. Those are great tips. And I think there's some that even I can take home and use. All right, so since a lot of our attendees are undergrads and grad students, we thought that we could also have our panelists share a little advice for that stage of your career. If we want to get started actually with Billy again.
Yeah, so maybe a little bit for both, kind of what other panelists have shared about kind of saying no, not saying no to any opportunity. I remember when I first got into a research lab, I didn't even know that research was really something you needed in undergrad or would it be beneficial. And I was working at a gym and the guy sitting next to me was like, hey, I'm graduating. There's a spot in my lab. Do you want it? I was like, yeah, I guess I can see what a lab is like. And that's why I was in grad school, was because of that conversation sitting behind the desk at the gym. So yes, say yes to lots of things. It'll benefit you a lot. And then maybe for grad school, similarly, is get kind of broad experience. You'll see lots of career talks. You'll see lots of research seminars. You'll have a lot of invited speakers you'll get the opportunity to go to lunch with. I'd say take advantage of those opportunities. Even if you don't think you want to do a career in policy, I was going to policy talks because they kind of shared cool insights about things that I really didn't care to do professionally, but skills that would benefit, I think, in any career. So yeah, say yes to lots of things when you're in those career stages.
Great advice. Jaya, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I also actually wanted to say I really liked what Billy said about teaching as well. So one of the things I think I would say for grad school and to a certain extent undergrad is if you get a chance to like be involved in teaching activities or student journals, student activities that relate to science, student advocacy groups, those kinds of things will also work to build that repertoire of soft skills I was talking about earlier that can be really useful. Other than that, networking, as everyone has already talked about, right? Like try to shadow people, even if you don't have the time to commit to do a whole like honors thesis or something. Try to ask someone, if you like a professor whose lecture you attended, go and ask them, hey, can I maybe drop by your lab sometime and see how research gets done? You know, it can be as simple as that to get you started in research as at the undergrad level. And at grad school, conferences. Try to network with people, collaborators, and chat with them.
Great advice. We're going to continue with Yash.
Yeah, really agree with everything everyone said so far. Maybe things I can add. I think in undergrad, you should spend time to find what your interest is, where you can see your career going, or where you think you can keep doing research or work after undergrad. I think that's important, just identifying your interest. And in grad school, maybe tips there would be, again, to not be afraid to ask questions when you're unfamiliar with things, however simple it might seem. And really, if there's students that are senior to you, just kind of mimicking what they've gone through because they've already done what you've done, and just kind of trying to retrace people and becoming them, kind of. Yeah.
Great thoughts. Sydney, what do you got for advice for undergrad and grad life?
Yeah, for undergraduates, so I guess if you're looking to kind of dip your toe into like research, for example, you know, either so I got a master's degree because I was trying to boost a med school application, but I ended up, you know, doing a lot of research and making my own projects and realizing that was something that I was interested in. So that's one way, you know, doing a research master's is one way to kind of try it out and see if you like it. Master's programs that pay you is always a good start. But there's also, you know, take advantage of lab technician positions. I feel like most of the people that I know that are going into PhDs didn't get a master's, and you know, they're working for a year or, you know, maybe 2 years after their undergrad. Um, Looking at, you know, I applied to my PhD just following along medical schools on the East Coast, just basing it on, you know, what schools had a good research program or a good medical school, and I applied to those schools, or, you know, did more research into them. And then, you know, unshockingly for graduate students, networking is it's just so important, especially if you're looking for policy. Send those cold emails to people, you know, reach out to program directors, be nice to people. You never know who you're talking to in an elevator or at a conference, and make your passion about what you're doing very apparent to people you talk to.
Great advice. Thank you. Hannah, let's keep rolling.
I also wanted to bring up the importance of finding the right mentors and also like keeping those for long term. That was sort of some advice I was given from advisors of like keeping good rapport for a long time because it can really help like guide your future and also open more doors and opportunities. And having like the right group of mentors and not just relying on like one or a few, but just really actually making that effort for new people that you meet and reaching out to people who you think might be good to mentor you and just getting advice from them, like not only just reaching out for recommendation letters, but really keeping them updated with what you're doing is important as well. Because for example, like just reaching out for recommendations is sort of more passive and it really helps them also to give better recommendations when they know what you've gone through and really almost acting more of like friends if you like find the right people that you trust that they can really know a lot about you can make a big difference in their perception, and that can really help in your future.
Great advice. We're gonna finish out with Laura. Laura, what advice do you have for undergrad and grad students?
All right, now can you hear me? All right. First off, I can expand on what Hannah was just saying about mentors and how important that is. So for instance, after I was working after undergrad, I did not get into grad school the first time I applied. And so I considered, I had gotten into master's programs and I considered going. And PI that I had been working with during undergrad said, don't do that. Don't pay for a master's, just come work for me and I'll help you get into grad school. And I never would have known that that was a good option. So definitely making those connections is good. For the undergrads, I think that's a really great time to explore all sorts of things. As people have said, I also am very glad I worked before I went back to grad school, and I strongly encourage that. So for instance, chemistry in my undergrad was a huge weed out course. I hated it. And then after I graduated, I went and worked as a chemist and I loved it. And that was where I decided that I did want to pursue a career in industry. So just because you like a class or hate a class, that doesn't necessarily give you an accurate picture of what a career in that would be like. So taking those opportunities to explore, whether it's working, volunteering, anything like that, can be very helpful.
Thank you guys all. These are all great tips. Okay, so when everyone RSVP'd for the event, we gave you the option to send in some questions. So now we're going to move on to a portion of our panel where we're going to bring up some of those and ask them to some of our panelists here. If other questions come to mind while we're doing this portion, please feel free to post them in the chat. And if you have any follow-up questions as we're running through, please use the raise hand button and we can call on you to unmute and kind of get that conversation flowing. But we're gonna get started with our pre-submitted questions. And the first one I'm gonna direct towards Billy. And it says, what are some general tips for getting started into research?
Yeah, so a lot of us, I think, have touched on this in some way already, but that would be tips would be, just to reiterate, not saying no to an opportunity, but also not being afraid to reach out to people and asking about opportunities. Like now that I'm in a faculty position and students are asking me if I do research and how I do research, it's really exciting for them to hear that people are interested in what they're doing and that they might want to contribute to it in some way. So do not be afraid to reach out to the faculty members where you are and just asking, hey, what do you do for research? Are you looking for students? Are you looking for help? The worst to say is no. The best to say is, yeah, join my lab. And even if they say there's no space for you, they could be a mentor in other ways as well. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out to people and ask for those positions. Maybe specific advice would be pursuing faculty or people doing research PIs who are new. It maybe is daunting in you might not think there's experience, but their level of enthusiasm and eagerness to have students and invest in students is quite high. I know that now, like I'm really looking for people to join my lab. So if you're looking and maybe you're getting no's from more senior people who you think would be better mentors, don't be afraid to ask that faculty member that's been there a year or two. They could be even more eager, maybe a better mentor. They just haven't had the chance yet. So seek out those people as well. So that's maybe advice for getting started in research. If you're at the undergrad or the grad level, maybe towards the grad level, say you did undergraduate research or not a lot of it, and you're starting to get into it for grad school, you can reach out to schools before you apply or as you're applying and say, hey, I'm considering going to this school for graduate school. Is your lab looking for students, kind of thing? And sometimes those start really good admissions conversations. Like I've been in meetings where a PI will say, oh, I remember this person, they reached out to me last summer and said they were interested in my lab. So like your level of enthusiasm could have an influence in an admissions decision for graduate school. So yeah, reach out, be forward thinking, plan ahead. Don't be afraid to ask people.
Great advice. Thank you. We're going to move on to our next question. This submission says, how does research differ between academia, government, and industry sectors? So I think I'm going to start maybe with Jaya, if you want to try and take a stab at that.
Yeah, so I can certainly talk about how research differs between academia and government and maybe outreach kind of research. So generally speaking, also I do have to have a disclaimer that I'm a contractor. I'm not actually a federal employee. However, I do, my day-to-day is at the National Institute on Aging. And the big difference is that the research that I do now is a lot of the big picture stuff. So as I mentioned earlier, I am working to support the goals of the National Plan to Address Alzheimer's. And so we are looking at the programs at the national and sometimes even the global level on what programs do we want to invest in now if we want to see a therapeutic that can prevent and cure these diseases in a year or 2 years and so on. So it's a lot of projecting forward thinking and then projecting back to now. What kind of decisions do we need to make now in order to achieve that? And then what kind of programs do we want to do strategic funding of? And then it's also a question of, sometimes it's a lack of infrastructure maybe. And it's like, okay, we don't have mouse models of Parkinson's. So how can we test a drug in something before we get it to humans and then it fails in clinical trials? And so sometimes it's a question of building up the appropriate infrastructure. And so me personally, I really like the bird's eye view of looking at the research landscape as a whole, while still being in touch with state-of-the-art progress in research, interacting with teams and consortia and even the pharma industry. So we regularly have meetings with the FDA, with the CMS, with industry partners, and those kinds of discussions can be very empowering and energizing to move the field forward. So that's a really big difference, I think, because in academia, when I was a postdoc, you get really deep into one topic and you kind of blur out the bigger picture, right? So you're just asking your little question and you're trying to attack it from different ways to get to the ground truth of that problem, which is fabulous as well. It's just it's a scaling issue as I see it.
I think I'm also going to direct this question towards Laura. Laura, you want to take a stab at the industry versus academia and government?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying my government experience was as a grad student at Uniformed Services University. So I can't say how that compares to FDA or NIH or anything like that. But in my experiences, I keep getting these confused. Academia and government have been more similar to each other than industry is. So for instance, when I started both of my industry jobs before grad school and then currently, there was a solid 2 months of training before I ever touched a client sample or one of our products or anything like that. So everything's very standardized. It's training sessions on how to pipette, how to use a pH meter, like even though you know those things, but this company's way of doing things, which I like because it takes a lot of confounds out of experiments when everybody is doing things the same way, even how you take out the trash, how you do anything. Also, another reason I like industry is that you are not the ones getting the funding. I didn't want to be writing grants, which you are in a lot of, well, definitely academia, some government settings as well. However, the flip side of that is that there are a lot of decisions that are kind of out of my hands, or that I'll come across something and it needs to go up the ladder and then come back down before that decision can be finalized. But yeah, I would say those are probably the biggest differences.
Thank you. The next question that was submitted is, what challenges does one run into if you have lab experience and are applying for / doing a PhD when you don't already have a master's? We're going to have Billy answer this one.
This is a good question, but I think it's a fear that maybe some people have that I don't know where it came from, but I don't think you should be dissuaded from not having a master's before going into a PhD. Some of the panelists you even have heard did, and others did not. I did not. And I would say, in my experience, it's actually less common to have a master's going into a PhD. Maybe not significantly, maybe it's 60-40 or 70-30%. But don't be dissuaded if you're going directly from bachelor's to PhD. You do need research experience. I've yet to meet somebody who had zero research experience to undergrad going directly into grad school. But even just having experience in undergrad and then moving to grad school is, I think, more common than not. So you don't need one. It could help you. It could also be just a decision point. If you're like, well, I'm unsure about grad school, rather a 1 to 2 year investment than a 6-year investment, that could be a good idea. But yeah, don't think you need one to get into grad school.
Thanks, Billy. I will say I do know one grad student that went straight from a bachelor's to the PhD with zero research. We're still confused how he got into that, but we applaud his abilities. But I would definitely concur with you that a lot of people I know, rather than do the master's route, usually did a 1 or 2 year post-bac fellowship and did research and then went on for that. So next question we have is, how much research experience should you gain before joining non-research paths that utilize your background as such? For example, consulting related to your science training. I'm going to direct this one at Jaya.
Yeah, so I would say when you're an expert, people will come to you. That's something I've experienced in my own career. When you're doing the outreach, or when you're reaching out to people to say that you're an expert, you should definitely have some kind of certifications or something, especially if you're expecting to get paid. So I would not approach, like, if you're reaching out to someone to say, I would like to be a consultant for whatever, you know, you should have publications and certifications to back up that kind of claim, especially if you're expecting to get paid.
Our next question was most reliable sources on how to craft a resume. So I'm going to post a couple examples in the chat. These are some resources as well. All of us on the panel are happy to provide a CV if you want to reach out to us individually, for whoever is on the career path that you're kind of looking for and want an example. So we're going to provide our contact info at the end of this event, and you can definitely use us as additional sources. Moving right along, we had someone ask if we have any insight or advice on trying to get back into academia after industry. And I think I'm going to ask Laura if you have any thoughts on this one.
See, it didn't turn yellow. There we go. So as I was just mentioning, I don't, you know, a lot of decisions are out of my hands. I don't take care of the funding, which I like, but that is a downside to being in industry and trying to go back to academia is you don't have that grant writing experience. Depending on the company you work for, you might be involved in submitting abstracts, writing papers, things like that. So that might, yeah, affect whether or how easy it is to go back towards academia.
Thanks, Laura. We just had a question come in, so I'm going to jump to that one. So this says, my question is very specific to international students moving to the US to pursue neuroscience. Any tips or thoughts on what it's like for us in the field? Is there anyone that would like to try taking a stab at that one?
Well, I guess I could go. I'm an international whatever. So this is my 4th country. Each country is different. There's pros and cons for every country that you apply to and every lab that you work in. The key is really planning early. And so about a year before you want to come to any country, you're going to be doing the work that normally domestic students are going to be doing maybe 2 or 3 months before. But you'll have to plan ahead a year. And this is especially true if you're also looking for funding, which I was, because I was looking for scholarships and things like that, or grants. And so that timeline will move up the further if you're looking for financial support and aid as well.
I would just add, I'm not an international student, but in grad school, I know that at least our school had an office for international students exclusively. That their job was to help international students transition into grad school, succeed in grad school, and move on out of it. So if you're maybe going towards a position or a school, feel free to reach out to that office. Most schools, I think, will have one. Tell them your situation, and I'm sure they're experts at knowing the visa process, what opportunities you're eligible for that are unique to you, which ones you maybe aren't eligible for, and replacements. So yeah, use those resources at the schools and institutions you might be trying for.
We have one question that was submitted prior that kind of feels like a follow-up for this, and it says, what experiences can international students pursue for science communication path? What education or experiences are helpful? Jai, do you have anything you want to add further on that?
Yeah, for science communication especially, it's really great to take a couple of writing courses, and it's great to actually. So I took a environmental journalism course, so I tried to take a lot of courses on writing for the general public, and then I also ended up volunteering for student journals and actually being editor. So if you get an opportunity to be a part of that, seek out those opportunities. There's also now a lot of communities. There's a community called the SciCommerce that will send along opportunities for you to write short pieces and things like that, so you can get your feet wet, see if it's something you enjoy. It's actually not very straightforward because you have to balance the nuance, communicating the nuance with being newsworthy or interesting. And so that's not always what we get trained on in grad school when we're writing papers and things like that. So it's an entirely different skill set that you would need to develop to really get into science communication.
Thanks, Jaya. We're gonna do Lynn's question next. She says, or they say, you all stress networking has a huge impact to finding employment and research opportunities. Are there any upcoming in-person network opportunities for early careers in neuroscience in the DMV area, or how can you go about finding these opportunities? And maybe let's have Billy go for this one.
Yeah, so great question, Lynn. So hopefully this chapter is exactly that for you and for people in that situation. So for our chapter, we love to put on throughout the year events that allow you to get in contact with other people. Some of them are more content-based. We'll say, here's how you get into a career in neuropolicy, or here's some career skills, but we also just host socials. So we'll get together at a local restaurant or bar in DC and just hang out with people who do neuroscience in the DMV. So that's a great way to get connected. Also, there's an opportunity to pitch next fall. So this coming fall, fall 2024, we'll be having our annual meeting. So we do this once or twice a year. And so that'll be an opportunity to hear from a keynote speaker, visit posters for different people doing neuroscience throughout the DMV, and then of course network with people at all different career stages. So my advice would be, one, if you're not already a member of the chapter, do become one. You can go to our website and it's free. You just send us some of your information, then you're on the list to receive our details. And then two, once you're on and you see those opportunities, join us for a social, join us at the annual meeting. Even if you're not presenting, just come hear about neuroscience, meet people, and get connected.
Thanks, Billy. Sydney, I see your hand is up. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to add on to that too. So outside of SfN DC and more on the professional networking side, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but some great resources for finding those networking opportunities can be, for example, the SfN main organization has an advocacy network where they send out a newsletter, and those are usually chocked full of different opportunities and events that you can attend. Research America is hosting a early career summit that they're still taking registration for. So I think that is a virtual series of events. But there's also, just looking at the SfN website, there's the Brain Initiative Conference in Bethesda coming up in a few weeks as well. And I haven't been myself, but just glancing at the description seems like another great networking opportunity on the professional side.
Laura, I see your hand up.
Another organization to check out for those interested or considering industry is BioBuzz. I'll try to find the URL and paste that, but they put on some great events. I had some people while I was applying to jobs who were able to basically recommend me for those positions, which is very useful in industry when you can get your resume to the top of the stack. And then also just informational interviews. I don't know if anybody has mentioned that, but that's very useful. Reach out on LinkedIn, find people who are in careers that you're interested in, and just ask them for 15, 20 minutes of their time, figure out what they do and if that's something you might like. And in the meantime, you're making a connection.
Thank you, everyone. I think in the interest of time, we're going to do only one last question. We had another one submitted that said, any of those resources for those of us looking for postdocs? Based on my knowledge, I think all of those are applicable, but I see Billy's unmuted, so I'm gonna let him answer.
Yeah, I posted this link. This is from SfN called NeuroJobs, and there's some postdoctoral positions listed there. So that's maybe one place to check for neuroscience specific postdocs. In terms of resources we could provide as the board, the annual meeting is a place to meet faculty. So faculty members do come and attend that event. And so networking with them, finding out from their colleagues what's available might be another option. I would say no one on this specific panel is currently a postdoc. And I don't even know if we even have any postdoc experience. Jai, were you a postdoc at any point?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
talk a little bit about how to find postdocs and how to search for them. But I didn't want to interrupt you if you have more tips, Billy. Okay. So the big thing is if you apply for your own grant, again, this will go back to planning out a year ahead of when you're planning to start. It'll be, once you have your own money, there are lots of really interesting grants that you can apply for to become an independent researcher. And there are transition grants, both NIH or foundation based. Like if you're a European coming into the US, you can apply for the Marie Curie grant, for example. So there's all kinds of grants. And so once you apply grants, you automatically become very attractive to prospective employers because they don't have to pay you out of their grant money. However, that's not, so there's really two peaks of applying for postdoc. One is a year ahead and one is 2 to 3 months before you plan on starting. If you're getting closer to the 2 to 3 month line, the best bet is really through conference and networking. A lot of the time, people who are looking for jobs will advertise it on their lab website. You can put out feelers through your mentor network. So let your mentors know, hey, I'm probably going to be graduating in a year. I am looking for postdoc in this fields. These are kind of the things I'm looking for. Do you know anyone who's looking? And so those kinds of, through the mentor network will be a lot easier because then you also get a higher chance of ending up in a decent lab. And so those are some of the tips I have for postdoc searches. Yeah, if you have more questions, I'm also happy to answer them via LinkedIn or something, or like reaching out. Because I know we're at time.
Thank you guys. These were great answers. At this point, to be considerate of everyone's time, we are going to wrap up. But as everyone's mentioned, please reach out to any of us individually with questions if there is anything that you didn't quite get answered.